My husband smiled into a ballroom microphone and told 275 people I was the most useless wife in the room. Then he tried to auction me for $20. Before anyone could laugh again, a man I had never met stood up and pledged $2 million instead. He did not say he wanted to save me. He said no one had the right to put a price on a human being. I thought that impossible moment would become the biggest shock of my life. I was wrong. The real shock came when he looked directly at me and called me by the name I had not heard in more than 26 years. My name is Seraphina Bennett Holloway, and that was the night I discovered my husband knew less about me than a complete stranger. Chapter 1. The $20 Wife. "Let's begin at $20, Everett said, smiling into the microphone as if he had just offered the ballroom the funniest line of the night. Who wants the most useless wife in Fairmont Bay? The laughter came in uneven waves. Some people laughed loudly because Everett Holloway was the most powerful man in the room, and they had spent years learning when to follow his lead. Others gave short, uncertain sounds, glancing around to see whether this was a planned part of the Holloway Civic Foundation gala. A man near the center raised his auction paddle and called out $20, apparently deciding that participation was safer than silence. I stood beside my husband beneath the white stage lights and felt his hand settle on my shoulder. There were 275 people in the ballroom at the Fairmont Grand Hotel that night. Investors, attorneys, developers, board members, donors, local reporters. People whose allergies I remembered, whose children I asked about, whose seating preferences I had arranged before they knew there was a problem. I had been awake since 5 that morning and inside the hotel by 6. The florist had delivered cream roses instead of the pale blue arrangements approved by the foundation board. 2 developers involved in a zoning dispute had been assigned to the same table. One donor had suddenly refused to sit near a former business partner. The kitchen had misplaced the note about shellfish allergies for a hotel executive whose company was considering a $38 million contract with Everett's firm. I corrected all of it. I also rewrote part of Everett's speech after he decided the original version sounded too formal. I placed a card inside his jacket with the name of a donor's daughter and the university she had just entered. When Everett greeted that donor later and asked about Caroline's first semester at Georgetown, the man looked genuinely moved. He told Everett he had an extraordinary memory. Everett accepted the compliment without looking at me. By dinner, the evening was running almost perfectly. That was always the moment Everett began to believe it had happened by itself. He had finished several glasses of scotch before pulling me onto the stage, but he was not drunk enough to misunderstand what he was doing. His words were clear. His balance was steady. The smile on his face belonged to a man who believed the room would protect him from the consequences of his own cruelty. He told them I did not understand business. He said I still wrote reminders on paper because technology frightened me. He called me the least interesting woman in Fairmont Bay. Then he said I was safe to tease because I had never embarrassed him in public. Tom Wexler, Everett's longtime friend and chief operating officer, lifted his glass and laughed. A few men beside him joined in. Several women remained silent. Lorraine Prescott, one of the foundation's oldest donors, stared at Everett without smiling. A young staff member near the stage lowered her eyes. Someone a few feet away began recording on a phone. Everett squeezed my shoulder lightly. "She knows I'm kidding," he told the room. I had heard those words for years. "You're too sensitive tonight. Everyone knows I adore you. I tease you because you're the safest person in the room." For most of our marriage, I had interpreted safe as loved, trusted, familiar. Standing beneath those lights, I understood what he had really meant. Safe meant I would absorb the humiliation. Safe meant I would smile to protect him. Safe meant he believed there was nothing he could do that would make me stop standing beside him. I did not cry. I did not leave the stage. I folded my hands in front of me and looked directly at my husband, while the laughter weakened around us. The man holding the paddle began to repeat his $20 bid. Then a voice from the back of the ballroom said $2 million. The room went silent so quickly I heard a fork strike a plate near the front. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit stood close to the ballroom entrance. He looked to be in his early 60s, with silver at his temples and a stillness that made everyone around him seem suddenly restless. He was not smiling. He did not raise a paddle. Everett gave a short laugh and looked toward the foundation staff. $2 million, he repeated. Now that is generosity. The stranger remained where he was. It is a charitable pledge, he said. $2 million for an independently administered emergency housing program serving women and vulnerable young people. A few guests turned toward Everett, waiting for him to transform the interruption into another victory. The man continued. The pledge has conditions. This performance ends now. The funds will be managed by an independent organization. Your name will not be attached to the program for promotional purposes. Everett's hand left my shoulder. The stranger looked at me. I am not buying, Mrs. Holloway. No one in this room has the right to place a price on another human being. I chose a number large enough to make everyone stop laughing. No one moved. Everett recovered first. He placed the microphone against his chest and stepped forward with the confident expression he used whenever a negotiation turned unexpectedly difficult. You must be Adrian Vale, he said. We were not informed that you would be joining us tonight. He held out his hand. Adrian Vale did not take it. I did not come for your foundation, he said. I came because your wife would be here. Everett looked at me so sharply that for a second I almost stepped backward. Adrian's attention remained on me. Seraphina Bennett Holloway. My maiden name moved through me like a hand opening a locked door. Almost no one in that ballroom knew the name Bennett. I had stopped using it professionally more than 20 years earlier. I have never met you, I said. It was the truth. Everett searched my face, as if he expected to find a confession forming there. Adrian nodded. No, you have not met me. But I believe you knew my sister. He paused before saying her name. Mara Vale. Something shifted at the edge of my memory. Rain against glass, a bus station, a Finn jacket, a girl holding a duffel bag against her knees. The images disappeared before I could reach them. Adrian asked if I would meet him the following evening at Linden House in Baltimore. He said the matter was private and did not belong in a ballroom full of people. Would you allow me to explain? He asked. The question affected me more deeply than the $2 million pledge. Would you allow me? Not, I need you to come. Not, this is what will happen. He asked. I looked at Everett. His face was controlled, but I could see the anger beneath it. Not anger over what he had done to me. Anger because someone else had interrupted the story he was telling about me. I turned back to Adrian. Tomorrow evening, I said. Everett barely spoke until we were in the car. Then the questions came. Where had I met Adrian? How long had I known him? What had I told him? Why would a man pledge $2 million because of a woman he claimed not to know? I answered each question the same way. I had never met Adrian Vale. Everett gripped the steering wheel. Men do not do things like that without a reason. I looked out at the dark highway. You called me useless in front of everyone I worked 12 years to bring into that room. It was a joke, he said. Everyone understood that. I did not. You were embarrassed because you were caught off guard. That is not the same thing. You said I was the safest person in the room. Because you are my wife. No, I said, because you believed I would absorb anything you did. He drove the rest of the way home without answering. Once inside, Everett went directly to his study. Through the closed door, I heard him call Celeste Rowe and order her to find everything available about Adrian Vale. A few minutes later, he called someone else. I later learned it was Nolan Fitch, a private investigator who specialized in financial and marital investigations. At the time, all I heard was Everett's voice. Bank accounts, phone records, employment history, any connection between Vale and my wife. He was not trying to protect me. He simply could not imagine that a man might respect me without wanting money, influence, or sex in return. By midnight, the 42-second video from the gala had several thousand views. An advocacy account reposted it with a caption about casual cruelty and powerful men who believed cruelty became harmless when a room laughed with them. I closed the page. At 2 a.m, unable to sleep, I opened the digital gala brochure. 12 members of the planning team were listed on the acknowledgement page. The florist was named, the catering manager was named, the junior coordinator who had started 3 weeks earlier was named. I was not. I sent Celeste a message and asked why. Her answer arrived less than a minute later. I was told you preferred to remain behind the scenes. I typed another question. Who told you that? The message showed as read. No answer came. A light still burned beneath Everett's study door. I moved quietly down the hallway and stopped outside. His voice carried through the wood. Find out what my wife did before she married me. A moment later, the door opened several inches as Everett crossed the room toward a cabinet. From where I stood in the dark hallway, I could see part of his computer screen. Adrian Vale, trustee of Vale Harbor Foundation. Legal search initiated 9 months earlier. Subject sought. Seraphina Bennett. I stepped back before Everett could see me. For 26 years, I had believed my husband knew everything important about my life. That night, I understood he saw the woman I had been before him, not as someone worth knowing, but as evidence, waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 2. The Life He Built from My Silence. By 7 the next morning, the video had been viewed more than 180,000 times. Everett was already in his study when I came downstairs. His tie lay across the desk, his coffee had gone cold, and 3 phones seemed to be ringing in different parts of the room. He had the particular look he wore when a problem had stopped being personal and started threatening something he considered real. The company, the foundation, his name. He ended one call and looked at me. We need to agree on what happened. I stood in the doorway. I know what happened. That is not what I mean. Communications wants a statement before noon. We say the auction was planned. You were in on it. Vale misunderstood the tone. I was not in on it. Sarah, this has already gone too far. It went too far when you pulled me onto that stage. His expression tightened. You are making this larger than it needs to be. For years, Everett had used that sentence whenever my pain became inconvenient. The problem was never what he had done. The problem was always the size of my reaction. I left him in the study and went into the kitchen, but the house no longer felt familiar. Every room seemed filled with things I had arranged for someone else. The flowers Everett liked, the coffee he preferred, the framed photographs chosen because they looked respectable in the background of interviews. I had spent most of my adult life helping rooms relax around him. The first time had been in 1998. I was teaching 4th grade at Bayview Elementary School then. Everett had one small development proposal, a borrowed suit, and more confidence than money. He invited me to dinner with a potential investor and his wife, because he said having me there would make him look stable. Everett talked through most of the meal: square footage, projected returns, zoning changes. The investor began checking his watch. His wife barely touched her food. I noticed she kept looking at the phone beside her plate, so I asked whether she was waiting for news. Her face changed. Their daughter had been taken to the hospital that afternoon after an asthma attack. She had insisted on attending the dinner because her husband said the meeting could not be moved. I asked her daughter's name. Within minutes, we were no longer 4 people trapped inside Everett's presentation. We were talking about children, fear, and the impossible choices adults made while pretending everything was under control. The investor signed 3 weeks later. Everett kissed me in the parking lot and said I had helped the room relax. I believed him when he called it small. Later, when Holloway Harbor development began to grow, the small things multiplied. I kept lists of birthdays and anniversaries. I sent condolence cards before Everett remembered there had been a death. I knew which donors had children applying to college and which executives were caring for aging parents. Before important dinners, I placed cards inside Everett's jacket with names, details, and questions he could ask. He called those the little things. The little things were why people believed he remembered them. The little things were why angry clients agreed to another meeting. The little things were why donors returned. In 2003, Everett asked me to leave Bayview Elementary and move to Fairmont Bay. 1 year, he promised. The company needs me now, and I need you. I packed my classroom books into boxes and told the principal I would probably return the following fall. But the next fall, Everett was opening a second office. The year after that, a community hearing required months of preparation. Then came donor dinners, development meetings, and eventually the Holloway Civic Foundation. There was never one day when I decided to stop being a teacher. My career disappeared through 100 postponements that each sounded temporary. That morning, I called Bill Carraway. Bill had chaired the company board for years. He answered on the third ring and sounded older than he had at the gala. I asked him whether the board had ever discussed giving me an official role. The silence told me the answer before he did. In 2019, he said, we proposed making you Director of Community Partnerships, salary, staff, operating budget. We believed you were already doing the work. My fingers tightened around the phone. Why was I never told? Bill exhaled slowly. Everett said you did not want to become an employee of your husband. He said you preferred contributing without public recognition. I thanked him and ended the call before my voice changed. Everett was still in the study. I walked in and placed my phone on his desk. Why did you refuse the community partnerships position for me? He looked up too quickly. Who told you about that? Bill. Everett leaned back. I was protecting you. If I hired my own wife, people would say you had the position because of me. A few months later, you hired a 32-year-old man with an MBA. He had formal qualifications. He also had my donor records, my event system, my relationship notes, and every process I built. That is not the same thing. No, I said. He had a title because he used my work. I had no formal experience because you never allowed the work to have a name. Everett stood. Why are you rewriting our marriage because of one bad joke? I looked at him. I am not rewriting it. I am reading the parts you never let me see. That evening, I drove to Baltimore alone. Linden House sat on a quiet street away from the waterfront hotels Everett preferred. Adrian was already there. He stood when I approached and waited until I sat before taking his own chair. He explained how he had found me. Mara had kept an old notebook with the name Miss Seraphina Bennett written inside. Lawyers traced Bayview Elementary, then my marriage record. A forgotten PDF on the Gala website listed me as host liaison. Adrian had purchased a donor table through his investment company and planned to approach me privately after the event. Then Everett took the microphone. Adrian asked whether I remembered October 1995. Rain against a bus station window returned to me. A girl of 17, a jacket too thin for the weather, a duffel bag held against her legs. Every time a car slowed near the curb, she flinched. I told Adrian I had almost kept walking. I had papers to grade. I was exhausted. School began early the next morning. But I turned back and asked whether she was hungry. I took her to a diner, called the social worker I trusted, and stayed until nearly 2 a.m. Later, I visited the group home, brought books, and helped with scholarship applications. Her name was Mara, Adrian said.
My sister. He told me he had been living in another state then. He had not known how dangerous their stepfather's home had become. Mara became an attorney. She worked with foster youth and children aging out of care. She founded Vale Harbor Foundation. Then Adrian's voice changed. She died in March, ovarian cancer. I looked down at my hands. A girl I had once worried about had become a woman who built something lasting, and I had missed all of it. Adrian placed an envelope on the table. She prepared this for you. I have not read it. Mara wrote that one meal had not purchased her future. What mattered was that a stranger had seen her without trying to control her. She believed I understood what happened when families and systems decided some people were easier not to see. The legal papers named me as a proposed successor trustee for a restricted housing and legal access fund worth $3.4 million. Adrian made it clear that I had no automatic authority. There would be interviews, review, a board vote, and an interim period under supervision. I told him I was not qualified. I had no nonprofit management degree. I did not understand financial reports. Mara had chosen me because she was grateful. Adrian did not argue. My responsibility was to find you. The decision belongs to you and the board. Near the end of the letter, Mara mentioned trying to contact me in 2005. She had invited me to her law school graduation. Someone replied that I had moved on, that I did not want to be involved with problems from the past, and that she should not contact me again. I had never written those words. Adrian showed me a photocopy of the envelope from Mara's files and a note she had made for her attorney. The letter had gone to the house Everett and I lived in before moving to Fairmont Bay. When I returned home, Everett was in the kitchen. "Did you ever receive a letter from Mara Vale?" He went still. "We received a lot of mail during that move." "Did you tell her I did not want to be contacted?" "No." But he would not look at me. After he went upstairs, I entered the study and opened the boxes labeled 2005 relocation. At the bottom of the last box, beneath old utility statements and closing documents, I found a yellowed envelope. Mara Vale was written in the return address. The seal had never been broken. Across the front, in Everett's handwriting, were 4 words. Do not forward. Situation resolved. I held the letter Mara had waited 20 years for me to receive, and understood that Everett had not only spoken for me in a boardroom in 2019, he had been deciding for years who was allowed into my life and who had to remain outside it. Chapter 3. The letters he decided I didn't need. I opened Mara's letter at the kitchen table just after dawn. The paper had yellowed at the edges, but her handwriting was steady and precise. She had been 27 when she wrote it, newly graduated from law school, full of gratitude and plans for a future she had already begun building. She did not ask me for money. She did not ask me to solve another problem. She only wanted to tell me that the frightened girl from the bus station had survived, finished school, and become someone who could help children who had nowhere safe to go. She had included an invitation to her graduation. Near the end, she wrote that the dinner I bought her in 1995 had changed the way she understood kindness. Not because I had rescued her, but because I had listened long enough for her to believe she deserved help. Everett came downstairs while I was reading the final page. He stopped when he saw the envelope. I placed the letter on the table between us. Tell me the truth. He remained standing. I already told you I do not remember every piece of mail we received 20 years ago. Your handwriting is on the envelope. His eyes dropped to the words he had written. Do not forward. Situation resolved.
The silence stretched until he finally pulled out a chair. "Yes," he said. I received it. The admission was quiet, almost careful, as if speaking softly could reduce the size of what he had done. "Did you answer her?" "I handled it. That is not what I asked." He rubbed one hand across his face. "The company was barely surviving. We were preparing to move. You had just lost the second pregnancy. You were not sleeping. You were blaming yourself for everything. Then a letter arrived from a young woman tied to one of the most difficult periods of your life." "Mara was not a difficult period of my life." "You knew her for a few months." "I knew enough to care what happened to her." Everett leaned forward. "I thought she would pull you back into a situation you could not fix. I thought I was protecting you." "Protecting me would have meant giving me the letter."
"You are not in a condition to make every decision." The sentence landed harder than I expected. He had reduced my grief to permission. Permission to read my mail. Permission to decide who could contact me. Permission to speak in my name. "You told her I did not want to remember her." "I told her you had moved on." "You made her believe the woman who sat beside her at 17 no longer wanted to know whether she was alive." Everett's jaw tightened. "She became a successful attorney. She built a foundation. Whatever I wrote did not destroy her life. You do not get to measure the harm of a choice you stole from someone else." He looked away. "This is what I mean, Sarah. You are taking an old letter and using it to punish me because of one bad joke." It was still a joke to him. The ballroom, the microphone, the $20, the letter, the position he had refused in my name. He treated each one as an isolated misunderstanding, because admitting they were connected would mean admitting there had been a pattern. By the end of that week, the gala video had passed 2.3 million views. A late-night host mentioned it during his monologue. A hotel group paused negotiations on a $38 million development contract. 2 other clients requested a written governance plan from Holloway Harbor Development. The Holloway Civic Foundation asked Everett to stop speaking publicly on its behalf while the board reviewed the situation. Then a group of women at the company sent a confidential letter to Bill Caraway. They described being left out of investor meetings, watching their ideas return under male colleagues' names, and being called emotional when they challenged decisions. No one accused Everett of a crime. There were no allegations of physical misconduct. The board still hired outside counsel to review leadership practices, credit attribution, promotion decisions, and the company's complaint procedures. Everett called it an overreaction. By then, Nolan Fitch had completed the first stage of his investigation into me. Everett did not show me the report. Celeste did. She asked to meet at a coffee shop several blocks from the office. When she arrived, she looked as though she had not slept. "I did not read his private financial sections," she said. Everett asked me to gather company records and old correspondence for outside counsel. Nolan's report referenced several of those files. She slid a thin folder across the table. Nolan had found no affair, no secret account, no financial relationship between Adrian and me. Instead, he had found Martha Lyle, a retired teacher who remembered the granola bars I kept in my classroom for children who arrived hungry. He found Diane Kerr, whose husband had died after 41 years of marriage. I had visited Diane on Tuesday afternoons for nearly 2 years, though eventually our visits became less frequent when she moved closer to her daughter. He found Harold Dunn, a veteran I had helped navigate the paperwork for his VA benefits after he had been sent to the wrong office twice. The report did not describe me as extraordinary. It noted that the acts were unrelated, informal, and mostly undocumented. I had not fixed every problem. I had lost touch with some people. There was no organization, no public recognition, and no financial benefit. The pattern Nolan identified was simpler. I tended to remain when other people found a reason to leave. Celeste turned to the final pages. "There is something else." The folder contained the 2019 email from Bill,
proposing that I become Director of Community Partnerships. Everett's response was attached. Sarah is happiest when she can contribute without public recognition. Below that was a later instruction telling Celeste to remove my name from gala acknowledgments because the foundation needed to appear independently managed.
I believed him, Celeste said. I thought you would ask for privacy.
So did everyone else. I am sorry. She was not asking me to forgive her. She was telling me why she would answer honestly when outside counsel interviewed her. That afternoon, I met Dana Reeves in an office overlooking Baltimore's Inner Harbor. Dana listened without interrupting, then placed a legal pad between us. First, you open an account in your own name. Second, you copy tax returns, retirement statements, ownership records, insurance policies, and anything related to Everett's interest in the company. You do not empty joint accounts, hide assets, or remove disputed property. I do not want to take what is his. Dana looked at me steadily. That sentence is why you need your own attorney. She explained that 26 years of unpaid work did not automatically create a wage claim, but Maryland's equitable distribution process could consider marital property, retirement assets, the value accumulated during the marriage, and the economic sacrifices each spouse had made. You are not required to leave with less than the law allows in order to prove you are a decent person, she said. 2 days later, Vivian Cross arrived at the house with a television proposal. She was polished, efficient, and not unkind. She explained that a national morning show wanted Everett and me together. The plan was simple. We would say the auction had been discussed beforehand. I would confirm I had not been hurt. Everett would announce a new donation. The segment would end with a reassuring image of our marriage. Vivian placed the statement in front of me. Attached were a media release, permission to use our image, and broad, non-disparagement language. I looked at Everett. You told them I agreed. It was the only way to hold the time slot. You agreed for me before asking me. We are discussing it now. No. You scheduled it. Now you are asking me to make your decision true. Everett lowered his voice. All you have to do is sit beside me, smile, and tell them it was a joke. After this is over, we can take a trip. We can talk about the marriage privately. I pushed the statement away. Have you asked me once whether I was hurt? He said nothing. Not in the car, not at home, not while the video spread across the country, not when he hired Nolan. He had asked what I knew, what Adrian wanted, what the board might do, and how much the company could lose. He had never asked what the night had cost me. I spent 26 years making you look kinder than you were, I said. I will not do it one more time on national television. Vivian closed the folder. I cannot proceed without your consent. Everett stared at me after she left. You are letting one mistake destroy everything we built. If the truth can destroy that image, then the image was never mine. The interview was canceled. By the following morning, a business reporter had learned Everett had confirmed my participation before receiving my consent. The details spread because it made the gala look less like an isolated joke and more like evidence of how casually he spoke for me. I began copying financial records that evening. Inside a desk drawer, beneath a set of insurance documents, I found a draft separation proposal prepared by one of the company's attorneys. It offered me a small condominium, a fixed cash payment, and a limited portion of retirement assets. In return, I would waive any request to value Everett's ownership interest in Holloway Harbor development. I would agree not to discuss the gala. I would never speak publicly about Mara's letter. The company could continue using photographs of us as the Holloway family during a transition period. Everett had prepared an exit for me before I had decided to leave. Even then, he wanted to control the price, the story, and the version of me the world was allowed to see. I did not confront him. I photographed every page and sent the files to Dana. Then I returned the proposal to the exact position where I had found it. The next morning, I opened a bank account in my own name
and transferred only the personal funds Dana had confirmed I could legally move. When the banker turned the screen toward me, there was no Mrs. Everett Holloway printed across the top. There was only Seraphina Bennett Holloway. It was not freedom yet. It was not victory. It was the first practical decision I had made in years without waiting for someone else to approve it. Chapter 4. The Woman They Thought Could Only Care. The first meeting at Vail Harbor Foundation took place 3 days later, in a glass conference room overlooking Baltimore Harbor. I sat at the far end of the table with no voting rights, no authority over the restricted fund, and no title beyond nominee. Evelyn Pierce did not waste time trying to make me comfortable. She was 58, silver-haired, precise, and had spent most of her career advising nonprofit boards after other people's good intentions had created expensive problems. Do you understand what a restricted fund is? Only in general terms. Can you read a nonprofit financial statement? Not well enough to pretend I can. Do you understand conflict of interest rules or the fiduciary duties of a trustee? No. Adrian shifted slightly beside me, but he did not interrupt. Evelyn folded her hands. Then why should this board consider you? A year earlier, I might have tried to give the answer she wanted. I might have listed every gala, every donor relationship, every crisis I had quietly solved. Instead, I told the truth. You should not appoint me because Mara was grateful. I have not worked inside a formal organization in more than 20 years. I have never held legal responsibility as a trustee. I need to learn what I do not know. Evelyn studied me. What are you asking for? Time to observe the programs, governance training, access to the reports. Then I can bring you a proposal, and you can decide whether I belong here. Her expression did not soften, but she gave a small nod. That is a better answer than confidence without competence. The following week, Adrian drove me to Safe Haven House, a converted apartment building on the edge of Baltimore. Meena Patel met us in the lobby. She wore flat shoes, carried 2 phones, and had the tired focus of someone whose day had begun with 3 emergencies before breakfast. She showed me the waiting list. There were more names than beds. She explained that women often returned to unsafe homes because they had no childcare, no transportation, or no way to pay a deposit on an apartment. Legal aid attorneys were overbooked. Case managers were underpaid. Donors liked funding rooms, plaques, and gala videos. They were less interested in paperwork, bus passes, or the staff hours needed to keep an address confidential. A generous decision made outside procedure can put someone in danger, Nina said. It can expose a location, violate the terms of a grant, or make one family believe they were denied because they did not tell their story in the most moving way. That was where I met Lena Ortiz. She was 32 and sitting beside her 2 children in a small common room. Her son worked on a puzzle, while her daughter read the same page of a book without turning it. Lena had once worked as a dental assistant. After she married Caleb, he began controlling the checking account, the car, and her work schedule. When she enrolled in a certified medical assistant program, he stopped paying for childcare and refused to let her use the car on class days. She fell behind and withdrew. When she finally left, Caleb threatened to tell the court she was unstable and incapable of providing a home for the children. As Lena spoke, I started calculating what 6 months of rent might cost. I turned toward Nina. What if the fund covered an apartment for her? Nina's answer came quickly. No. The word embarrassed me. I only meant temporarily. I know what you meant. Lena still needs an assessment, a safety plan, legal review, childcare, transportation, and a housing plan that does not expose her location. She also deserves the same process as every other person waiting for help. I looked back at Lena. For most of my life, I had believed kindness meant stepping forward and doing something immediately.
but Everett had spent years making decisions for me, while insisting he knew what was best. I could not repeat that pattern simply because my intentions were better. "What do you need?" I asked Lena. She was quiet for a moment. "I do not need someone to promise they will save me." Her voice was steady, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the chair. "I need enough time to finish what I already started." I carried that answer back to the foundation. For the next several weeks, I learned to read reports I had once assumed were beyond me. I asked questions until the numbers stopped looking like a language designed to keep me outside the room. The annual budget showed nearly $420,000 spent on the gala, branding, donor entertainment, and production. The emergency housing program was short by approximately $185,000. I did not propose canceling the gala. I knew how much donor trust depended on continuity. I also knew where the waste lived. Imported flowers, custom gifts no one remembered, production upgrades ordered because one board member disliked the lighting the previous year, a hotel ballroom chosen for prestige rather than function. I created a revised event budget and separated donors into groups based on why they gave. Some cared about visibility. Others cared about measurable outcomes. Most had never been asked whether they would rather fund a centerpiece or a month of childcare. Then I designed a 12-month pilot program, short-term rental assistance, childcare vouchers, transportation support, legal aid referrals, job certification grants, case management, measurable outcomes and review dates. When I presented it, Evelyn listened without expression. "This is because of Lena," she said. "Lena showed me the gap." That is not the same thing as proving the gap exists. I placed Nina's reports on the table. "It exists in 47 active cases and a waiting list we cannot responsibly clear. Lena is one person. The program is not for one person." The board questioned every section. What would qualify a family? Who would approve payments? How would funds be audited? What happened when a participant left training? I answered what I could, and admitted what still required professional review. After 2 hours, they asked me to leave the room. Adrian joined me in the hallway. "You did well." "I do not know whether that is true." "You did not pretend to know more than you did. That matters here." The door opened 20 minutes later. Evelyn called me back inside. The board approved the pilot. They also appointed me interim trustee for 6 months, under committee supervision. Major disbursements required approval. I had to complete governance training and submit monthly reports. It was not absolute power. That made me trust it. Lena entered the program through the same assessment process as everyone else. Legal aid helped her request a temporary protective order and respond to Caleb's custody petition. Her address remained confidential. A case manager verified the CMA program, arranged childcare, and helped create a transportation plan. At the temporary custody hearing, Caleb's attorney argued Lena had no stable home, no full-time job, and had removed the children from their father. Lena's attorney presented the housing plan, the children's school records, her training enrollment, Caleb's threatening messages, and bank statements showing how he had restricted access to money. The judge granted Lena temporary primary custody. Caleb received supervised visitation while the court continued its evaluation. It was not a final victory. It was enough space for Lena to keep moving. After the hearing, I stood with Nina outside the courthouse. "Lena had a clear reason to leave," I said. I kept telling myself I did not. Nina looked at me. "You do not need bruises to prove a life has been shrinking around you." I did not answer because I knew I would remember the sentence for the rest of my life. While I learned to build something, Everett began discovering what disappeared when I stopped maintaining it. The hotel contract remained on hold. Another client declined to renew. Holloway Civic Foundation removed him as its public representative. Outside counsel found no criminal conduct, but it identified problems involving exclusion, credit attribution, and leadership accountability. The board required Everett to step back from public communications and begin leadership coaching. Tom Wexler stopped defending him and began protecting the company. Bill demanded a transition plan. The company did not collapse. It simply stopped rearranging itself around Everett's certainty. A dinner with investors went badly when he failed to remember that one executive's father had recently died. He called a donor's daughter by the wrong name. He was surprised to learn a longtime partner had withdrawn from a project because of a family crisis I had known about for weeks. 2 donors did not renew, not because I asked them to leave,
because no one had called them. The little things had never been little. On December 4th, I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment overlooking a narrow side street in Fairmont Bay. Dana had reviewed everything I packed: clothes, books, personal documents, receipts, and keepsakes that belonged to me alone. I left the disputed property untouched. The apartment was smaller than the guest suite in our house. I bought a mustard yellow chair Everett had once called ugly. I ate dinner when I was hungry. I stopped listening for the study door to close. The silence there felt different. It did not punish me. A week later, Everett asked to visit. I agreed. He stood outside until I opened the door. His eyes moved around the apartment and stopped on the yellow chair, but he did not comment.
"I read Nolan's full report," he said. I waited. "Martha, Diane, Harold, all those years." He looked down. "I live beside a stranger." "No," I said. "You live beside a woman you stop asking questions about." He looked at me then. "Is Adrian the reason you left?" "Adrian brought me a letter. You gave me every other reason." I told him plainly. He had hidden Mara's letter, spoken for me, taken credit for my work, used my silence as permission. Everett sat on the edge of the sofa. "I was afraid. Of Adrian? Of you not needing me." The honesty of it silenced me. He continued. "I was afraid someone else would see what you were worth. Then you would see it too, and you would realize this marriage was not enough. That is the first completely honest thing you have said to me." He handed me Mara's envelope, though it had already been mine. "I was wrong to keep it." Then he weakened the apology. "I thought I was protecting you." He asked me to delay the divorce. He offered therapy. He said 26 years deserved more time. "I am not coming back because you finally understand the possibility of losing me." "I am trying to change." "Then change without treating me as the prize you receive for doing it." He left without arguing. The next morning, a cream envelope arrived from Vail Harbor Foundation. Inside was an invitation to deliver the keynote address at the spring gala. My name appeared on the first page. Seraphina Bennett Holloway, Interim Trustee, Housing and Legal Access Initiative. For several minutes, I considered declining. Then Lena sent me a photograph of her new student identification card. Her message contained 4 words. "I showed up today." I looked back at the invitation and typed my answer. So will I. For the second time in my life, I would walk toward a stage. This time, no one would have to pull me there. Chapter 5. The Second Ballroom. By May, I had learned that choosing to step into the light felt very different from being dragged there. The Vail Harbor Foundation Gala was held at the Harbor Life Museum in Baltimore, in a glass-walled room overlooking the water. I dressed alone in my apartment and chose a deep blue gown without wondering whether Everett would consider it too plain or too noticeable. I did my own hair. I did not send a photograph to anyone, asking whether I looked appropriate. I had lived alone for nearly 6 months. The divorce was still being negotiated, but the apartment had begun to feel like mine. The mustard yellow chair sat beside the window. My books filled the shelves in no particular order. Some evenings, the quiet still frightened me. On others, it felt like the first honest sound I had heard in years. My hands shook as I fastened my earrings. I had organized rooms like the one waiting for me that night. I had prepared speakers, calmed donors, corrected programs, and made sure everyone important felt remembered. I had never been the person people came to hear. Adrian met me near the museum entrance. He noticed my nervousness, but did not tell me not to be afraid. He said I did not have to become Mara that night.
I did not have to explain my entire marriage or prove that every painful thing had made me stronger. I only needed to tell the truth about what one woman had done and what I had chosen to do after learning about it. There was no romance in the way he offered his arm. There was steadiness. By then, Adrian had become something close to family. He never decided what I needed. He simply remained nearby long enough for me to choose. Evelyn Pierce found me before the ballroom doors opened. She carried a thin folder beneath one arm. The board had voted that afternoon. For 6 months, I had attended governance training, submitted monthly reports, sat through committee meetings, and learned to ask questions before offering solutions. The Housing and Legal Access Pilot had helped 14 families secure temporary housing. 9 women had returned to or completed job training. 11 had received legal assistance. Not every case had succeeded. 2 women left the program. 1 family returned to an unsafe home despite the resources offered. Another participant had to pause training to care for a sick parent. We recorded those outcomes too. A foundation that reported only success was not measuring impact. It was advertising. Evelyn handed me the folder. The board had approved me for a 3-year term as trustee of the Housing and Legal Access Initiative. For a moment, I could not speak. Then Evelyn added that the decision had not been made because Mara was grateful. It had been made because I had done the work. Coming from her, it meant more than praise. When I entered the ballroom, I noticed the differences immediately. At Everett's gala, I had been pulled toward the stage without warning. Here, I walked in on my own. At Everett's gala, my name had been removed from the program. Here, Seraphina Bennett Holloway appeared on the first page. At Everett's gala, the microphone had felt like a weapon in my husband's hand. Here, it waited at the podium like an invitation. Then I saw Everett. He sat near the back of the room alone. He had purchased a ticket like any other guest. He had not requested a special table or asked to speak with me beforehand. Adrian followed my gaze and quietly offered to have someone approach him. I said no. Everett was allowed to hear the truth. He was not allowed to change it. When my name was called, the room became quiet. Not the frightened silence that had followed Adrian's pledge. The silence was voluntary. People wanted to listen. I walked to the podium and told them about October 1995. The rain, the bus station, the girl wearing a jacket too thin for the weather, the duffel bag held tightly against her knees. I told them I had almost kept walking because I was tired, had papers to grade, and believed someone else would probably help. Important moments rarely announced themselves as important. Sometimes they appeared as an inconvenience at the end of a long day. I told them about the diner and the social worker. I told them the most meaningful thing I had done was not giving advice or writing a check. It was asking whether Mara was hungry. Mara had not left me a debt to collect. She had not tried to purchase kindness 30 years later. She had built a system so young women like her would not have to depend on accidentally meeting the right stranger on the worst night of their lives. My role was not to rescue anyone. It was to help protect a system that respected their choices, preserved their dignity, and gave them enough stability to act on their own decisions. Then I told the room something I had only recently admitted to myself. For most of my life, I had confused not asking for recognition with humility. I had confused silence with peace. I had confused sacrifice with love. I had stood behind other people for so long that they began to believe I did not have a name. Being unseen had never made me small. It had only shown me how easily a life could disappear when everyone benefited from its silence. The lights dimmed. Martha appeared first on the screen and spoke about the food I had kept in my classroom for children who arrived hungry. Harold described the afternoon I helped him locate the correct office for his veterans' benefits after he had almost given up. Diane said I had never tried to make her grief disappear. I had simply made sure she did not have to sit inside it alone. Lena appeared last, with her 2 children beside her. She did not call me her rescuer. She said I had asked what she needed and listened when the answer was not a check. The foundation had helped create enough time and stability for her to finish what she had already started. She had completed her certified medical assistant program and begun an externship at a pediatric clinic. She had an apartment, temporary primary custody of her children, and an attorney helping her through the rest of the case. Her life was not perfect. It was hers. When the lights returned, I looked toward Everett. He was not smiling. He was not searching for a camera or trying to become part of the moment. He was listening to other people describe his wife, as if hearing the life story of someone he had never met. I never said his name from the stage. I did not need to humiliate him. The truth was enough. After the gala, Everett found me near the coat check. He looked older than he had 6 months earlier. He said he was not there to ask me to return. Then he named what he had done, without hiding behind explanations. He had taken credit for my work. He had told the board I did not want a title because keeping me unofficial benefited him. He had hidden Mara's letter. He had used me as the safe target for his jokes because he trusted me to protect him from consequences. He had investigated me before ever trying to understand me. He had liked me being invisible because it made him appear larger. There was no excuse attached. He said he was sorry and did not expect the apology to repair anything. I believed him. That surprised me more than the apology itself. I told him I believed he was sorry, but my life could not become the reward for his finally becoming honest. Then I told him I forgave him, but I was not coming back. He accepted it without argument. The board had asked him to step away from executive duties for 12 months. He had decided to resign permanently as CEO and remain only as a non-operating shareholder during the transition. He was in therapy and leadership accountability coaching. I told him I hoped he changed because he no longer wanted to live that way, not because he believed change would eventually bring me back. By September, our divorce was complete. We reached a mediated settlement that divided the marital assets fairly. I received my portion of the retirement accounts and a payment based on the value of Everett's company interest accumulated during our marriage. The agreement prevented the company from using my name or image in future public relations materials. The non-disparagement terms applied to both of us. I did not leave with nothing. I did not take everything. Justice was not the same thing as destruction. Holloway Harbor Development survived. Tom became interim CEO. Some contracts returned, others were lost permanently. The board adopted new policies for credit attribution, mentorship, employee complaints, and executive oversight. Everett faced consequences. He was not erased from the world. In October, Lena sent me a photograph of her new employee badge from a pediatric practice. Her message said she could pay the next month's rent herself. I told her I had known she would get there. Adrian and I continued working together at the foundation. We became friends and something close to family. Perhaps one day I would love someone again. Perhaps I would not. Either possibility felt complete. My life no longer required a new man to prove that leaving the old one had been worth it. Later that month, Adrian and I visited Mara's grave at Oak Ridge Cemetery. I placed my hand against the cool stone,
and told her she had returned more than money or a title to me. She had returned my name, my memories, and my right to choose what happened next. As we walked toward the cemetery gates, I noticed a young woman sitting alone on a bench. She looked about 20. A duffel bag rested beside her. Her jacket was too light for the cold, and she checked her phone every few seconds while keeping her distance from everyone passing by. I recognized the watchfulness. I sat at the far end of the bench and asked whether she wanted something to eat, someone to call, or simply another person to sit there for a while. She studied me for a moment. Then she said she only wanted me to sit.
So I did. There was no microphone, no audience, no charitable pledge, no one recording us. For 26 years, Everett had told other people who I was. It took a ballroom full of laughter, a letter delivered 20 years late, and a woman who was no longer alive to remind me of the truth. I had never been a $20 wife. I had never needed a man to pledge $2 million to make me valuable. I only needed to stop handing the microphone to people who profited from my silence. Do you think I was right to forgive Everett without taking him back? Or did he deserve another chance after finally changing? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to stay with us for more stories about women who stayed silent long enough, then finally chose themselves.